Hey guys, welcome to our Week 15 NFL predictions video. We'll be looking at who we think is going to win, lose, and what we predict the final scores will be. Go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. And like I said, this is going to be looking at Week 15's games going from Thursday all the way to Monday night. Let's go ahead and get things started. So kicking things off, Thursday night at 8:15 p.m. on Prime, we have the 5-8 Chargers versus the 5-8 Las Vegas Raiders. So the Raiders are 3-point favorites here in this game. So this game, just like a lot of other games this season, is the battle of the backup quarterbacks. I've never seen so many starting quarterbacks go down besides this year. So Justin Herbert did hurt his finger. He's now out for the season. So this game is going to be a really sloppy, boring game to watch. But it's going to be the quarterback stick starting for the Chargers versus Aiden O'Connell starting for the Raiders. So like we said, the battle of the backup quarterbacks. So this game is really just who's going to play the worst. But when you look at the team stats here, Chargers, they've had a really bad year. The head coach, as of right now, he's just waiting to get fired. So he's basically standing there. He's a dead man walking. They're not playing for anything this season, just trying to get through this season. He is trying to save his job, but there's no percentage that he is going to be able to save his job. So the Chargers are coming in, they're averaging 21.7 points per game. The Raiders, 15.5 points per game. That's half of the season with Jimmy G and then half with the backup quarterback. But on defense, Chargers give up 21.7 points per game and the Raiders give up 19.9 points per game. So even though the Chargers have the better offense, that's with Justin Herbert. He's a gunslinger. He throws for a lot of yards. He's not going to be there. So they're not going to be racking up passing yards this season. They're going to try to rely on Eckler at running back. But he's been struggling for the last few weeks. Las Vegas, even though they cannot score a touchdown to save their life, one thing that they do have going for them is they actually do have a pretty decent defense. So I'm going to ride with the Raiders getting the win here because this is Stick's first start. And his first start is versus a pretty solid D. So I have the Raiders winning this game 17-13 and covering that spread as well. The next game that we'll be looking at is on Saturday. Yes, we do have some Saturday games this week, basically because college football is pretty much over. But kicking things off Saturday, December 16th at 1 p.m. on the NFL Network, we have the 7-6 Minnesota Vikings versus the 7-6 Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati is 3-point favorites here. Just like the Thursday night game, this is also a battle of the backups. We have two second-string quarterbacks playing third-string quarterbacks playing. So for the Vikings, they obviously lost Kirk Cousins, so they traded for Josh Dobbs. He had 2 or 3 really good games and then completely fell off the rails. He's been stinking it up since then. He's now been benched, and they're now going with Nick Mullins at quarterback starting for the Vikings. So obviously, that's pretty shaky. They're down to their number 3 quarterback. For the Bengals, they lost Joe Burrow for the year, but Jake Browning has stepped in, and he has been going off. He's played really good the last 3 weeks straight. They have 2 straight wins. He's throwing for a lot of yards, and he's not throwing for any picks. That's the big thing there. And the Bengals still have the better playmakers, technically, because Justin Jefferson has still been banged up, but the Bengals have Joe Mixon. They have Chase, so they can run the ball. They can take pressure off of Browning, and they do have a number 1 wide receiver threat in Chase. When you're looking at the team stats here, Minnesota, although this is with 3 different quarterbacks now, they average 20.5 points per game. Cincinnati averages 21.5 points per game. And on defense, Minnesota gives up 18.6 points per game. Cincinnati, 22.1 points per game. The Bengals are the hotter team right now. They have the quarterback situation sorted out because the backup has stepped up into Joe Burrow's shoes, just like they never missed a beat. They've been going off. They have actually been playing better so far this year with Browning than they were with Burrow. Yes, the honeymoon could end at some point. He is probably due for a pretty sloppy game, but am I really supposed to think that Mullins is going to beat the Bengals? He's technically the third-string quarterback. I just don't see that happening. Anything's possible with 2 backups, but I have the Bengals winning this game 24-14 and covering that spread. The next game that we'll be looking at 4:30 on Saturday, we have the 7-6 Pittsburgh Steelers versus the 7-6 Colts. Both of these teams, just like the Vikings and Bengals, they're both still technically in the playoff race, so they have everything in front of them still. The Colts here are 1.5 point favorites here. So with this game, just like the other games, this is also a battle of the backup. So for the Steelers, Kenny Pickett did go down, so Mitch Trubisky will probably be getting the start here on Saturday. For the Colts, they lost Anthony Richardson earlier this season, so they've been rolling with Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew is one of those 50-50 quarterbacks. He has some really good games, he has some bad games. There's no average baseline Gardner. It's just good or bad. So you basically just have to flip a quarter. He could throw for 3 touchdowns. He could throw for 3 picks. We don't really know. They do have one of the deeper running back rooms. They have Jonathan Taylor. They have Zach Moss. They have Pittman at wide receiver. But Jonathan Taylor has been out for the last 2 weeks. He is doubtful this weekend, so he could play, but he might not play. But since he's been out, the running game has kind of slowed down. But when you're looking at the team stats here, so the Colts come in. They are averaging 24.2 points per game. Pittsburgh has a atrocious offense. They average 16.2 points per game. But what Pittsburgh has going for them is they have a really good defense. They have a top 10 defense. They give up 19.2 points per game, and the Colts give up 25.2 points per game. With Pittsburgh, sometimes they get blown out. If they win, though, it's usually a really close, hard-fought game, and it's because their defense, led by TJ Watt, gets the stops, gets 1 or 2 turnovers. That's the difference maker, and they'll win like 15-12 or something like that. But when they lose big just because their offense usually can't get first downs. I'm going to go with the Colts to get the win here. They are at home. They still have the better playmakers technically. Steelers, their offense is just so bad. I don't see them being the Colts. I have the Colts winning 24-20 and covering the spread. The next game and the final game for Saturday night at 8:15 on Saturday, we have the 7-6 Denver Broncos versus the 9-4 Detroit Lions. Detroit is 4-point favorites here. So we finally have some starting quarterbacks playing, some number 1 quarterbacks. For the Broncos, we have Russell Wilson, and for the Lions, we still have Jared Goff. So with this team, when you're looking at these two teams here, you have Denver, who went on a 5-game winning streak. Then they lost the game, and then I did predict them to win last week. They did get the win, so they're back to winning right now. They are 5-1 their last 6 games. Their defense has really stepped up those last 6 games, playing a lot better. Russell Wilson, he's not doing anything to win anyone the game, but his main concern is just don't do anything to lose the team the game. He's only throwing for about 150 to 200 yards per game, 2 or 3 touchdowns, no picks. That's his primary goal, is just manage the game and keep the game close for the defense to win the game. For the Lions, they started out the year for the first half. They had a top 10 offense. They had a top 10 defense. And then the defense completely fell off the rails. And they've had a lot of turnovers. They're probably averaging, probably between 2 to 4 turnovers every single game for the last 5 to 6 games. So they've been playing really sloppy, and their defense has been getting torched. That's the main thing that's kind of led to them having a sloppy second half. But this is a very talented team. They have Goff. They have Montgomery at running back. They have St. Brown at wide receiver. So their defense can technically play better than they have been playing, but they can throw it, they can run it, and they have wide receiver threat. So they are definitely the better team here, and they're still fighting to get the best shot at the playoffs that they can. So to get the best position for the playoffs. Denver Broncos are obviously, they have a winning record right now. So they are still trying to fight to make sure that they can make the playoffs. Looking at these two team stats here, the Broncos come in, they average 22.1 points per game. The Lions average 26.2 points per game. So they still have a top 10 offense. And on defense, both teams leave a lot to be desired here. So the Broncos give up 23.8 points per game, but they are playing a lot better the last 6 weeks. And the Lions, they average 24.2 points per game. That's their Achilles heel right now, is the defense and turnovers. But the Lions are 4-point favorites here. I have the Lions getting back to winning. They are a really good team. They're just kind of going through a little sloppy phase right now. But leading up to the playoffs, they have to be playing a lot better. I have the Lions winning 28-21 and covering that spread. Next game is on Sunday, December 17th at 1 p.m. on Fox. We have the 5-8 Chicago Bears versus the 8-5 Cleveland Browns. Cleveland comes into this game as 3-point favorites. With this game, with the Bears, they had a backup playing for the majority of the season. Justin Fields is finally back. He has been playing great. He has been going off. Had he not been hurt this season, this is probably a 500 team right now. This seems a lot better than their record shows because a lot of those losses were without Justin Fields. He is a fantasy dream, basically. The guy can throw, and he runs, between 50 to 100 yards every single game. So that definitely takes that team to another level. A lot of people have the Browns drafting a quarterback this offseason. So what is their future with Justin Fields? I personally think they would be crazy to move off of him right now. But if they did, they would probably try to trade him and try to get a pretty high draft pick for him right now. For the Browns, this team's lost a lot of players. They lost Chubb. They lost Deshaun Watson. So they also are on to their third option at quarterback. They signed Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco got called up. Joe Flacco has been going off. This looks like Joe Flacco from 2010, basically. And you know that you can win with Joe Flacco because he won a Super Bowl with Baltimore, and it had absolutely nothing to do with him. They won it solely off of defense. He just made some passing plays whenever he had to get first downs. And that's what he can do with this team. The Browns have one of the best defenses in the country, top 5 defense. He just has to not lose them the game. You know that you can do that with Joe Flacco. The guy doesn't throw very many picks. He's just serviceable. Just get them through the game. Looking at the team stats here, you have the Chicago Bears. They average 20.8 points per game. Cleveland averages 22.2 points per game. And on defense, Chicago gives up 23.8 points per game. Cleveland gives up 20.9 points per game. But their defense is a lot better than that. They did go through a lot of injuries this year. They've definitely been playing a lot better with Joe Flacco at the helm. I have Cleveland getting the win here, winning 21-17 and covering that spread solely based off of their defense bottling up Justin Fields and keeping this game close. The next game we have at 1 p.m. on CBS, we have the 6-7 Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the 6-7 Green Bay Packers. Green Bay is 3.5-point favorites here. So Tampa Bay did get a win last week at the very end of the game. Baker Mayfield took them down the field. They won it at the very end. So props to them for finally getting back into the win category. Baker Mayfield having a pretty decent year so far this year. He's kind of like Gardner Minshew, but a little more serviceable. So you have good Baker, bad Baker, but you've actually had pretty good Baker so far this year. He hasn't had any bad games. He's just been serviceable. He's not lighting up the stat board, but he's actually doing pretty well. For the Packers, Jordan Love has basically been going off the whole second half of the season. They did lose this past weekend. I'm not going to hold that on them because they were bound to lose at some point, but they've been one of the better teams for probably the last 5 to 6 weeks. So they're having a very strong year. Both teams are fighting to get back to 500 to try to compete for the playoffs. I don't think that they'll make the playoffs, but first step is trying to get back to 500. So whoever wins this game will be back at 500. Looking at the total team stats here. The Buccaneers average 20.2 points per game. Green Bay averages 21.5 points per game. So the teams are pretty even there. And on defense, the Buccaneers give up 20.8 points per game. Green Bay gives up 20.5 points per game. So they're virtually tied in every statistical category. But who's been the hotter team for the last 5 to 6 weeks? That's the Green Bay Packers. So Green Bay, 3.5-point favorites here. I have the Packers winning this game, getting back into the win category, winning 24-20. So the game will be pretty close, but they will cover that spread. The next game that we'll be looking at 1 p.m. on CBS, we have the 7-6 Houston Texans versus the 5-8 Tennessee Titans. Tennessee is 3-point favorites here at home. So this is potentially another battle of the backups. For the Titans, Ryan Tannehill did go down. They've been starting Will Levis, who is the rookie out of Kentucky since then, and he's been playing a lot better than Ryan Tannehill. But I've always said Ryan Tannehill is not a good quarterback in any way whatsoever. So props to the Titans. They finally have someone who can throw the ball. They have Derrick Henry at running back, so they can run it down teams' throats. And for the Texans, so C.J. Stroud was basically having an offensive rookie of the year season so far. He still is. So he's closing in on 3,700 yards, 20 touchdowns, 5 picks. But he did get a concussion this past weekend. He did get knocked out of that game. He hasn't been cleared to start this Sunday. He is still in concussion protocol as of right now. But they also haven't said that he's not starting. So we don't know if he's starting or the backup starting. So as of right now, I'm going to be going off of faith that C.J. Stroud starts. So I'm basing this prediction off him starting. If he doesn't start, that completely changes things. Looking at the team stats here, the Titans come in. They average 18.4 points per game. They do not have a good offense. The Texans average 22.1 points per game, and Houston gives up 21.5 points per game, and Tennessee gives up 21.7 points per game. Tennessee does have the better defense. They do have some pretty good games. They have some bad games, but they have the better overall defense. So like I said, I'm basing this prediction off of CJ Stroud showing up and throwing the ball for the Texans. I have Houston getting the win here, so I'm going to be going with that +3. I have Houston winning 21-17. The next game that we'll be looking at 1 p.m. on CBS, we have the New York Jets at 5-8 versus the Dolphins at 9-4. Miami is 8.5-point favorites here. This spread was a lot higher, but it's been moving down for the Jets. This is a backup team. Aaron Rodgers did go down game 1. They had Zach Wilson playing. He got benched. They went to the third string. He was even worse. They brought Zach Wilson back this past weekend. He went off, and the Jets won. Props to them for fighting hard, getting that win. They looked like an offensive juggernaut this past weekend. Do not count on that. That's probably never going to happen again from this point going forward. Zach Wilson throwing for over 300 yards, that's pretty rare. Zach Wilson throwing for over 150 yards is pretty rare. So I don't see that happening again this season, so I'm not going to be betting on them having back-to-back performances like that. For the Dolphins, they obviously have one of the best, if not the best, offense in all of football right now. It's top 3. With the Dolphins, you have Tua, Mostert, you have Hill, you have Waddle, Barris. This team is loaded at every single skill position. They had the win this past Monday night. They coughed it up. They lost it, but they did have a double-digit lead, and they gave it up at the very end of the fourth quarter. But this is still a really good offense, and their defense has been playing pretty good for the last 6 weeks straight. But looking at the total team stats in here, the Jets come in, they average 15.5 points per game. Like we said, they have a bottom 5 offense in all of the NFL, so they can't score at all. The Dolphins come in, they average 31.6 points per game, so over double what the Jets average. And on defense, the Jets give up 19.8 points per game. The Dolphins give up 22.6 points per game. Dolphins' rush defense is pretty good, so they'll be looking to shut the run game down and force Zach Wilson to beat them through the air. I have the Dolphins cruising to a win here, 31-17, and covering that spread. Look for the Finns to get things back on track. The next game that we'll be looking at 1 p.m. on Fox, we have the 8-5 Kansas City Chiefs. They've been struggling for the last 3 weeks straight. Still, the biggest issue is their offense. No one can catch the ball. And then you have the Patriots sitting at 3-10. Patriots have the worst offense, hands down, in all of football. And there's been some pretty bad offenses this year, but they're the worst. Kansas City is 8-point favorites here. So Kansas City is obviously 8-point favorites on the road because even though they don't have a good offense, they have a top 5 defense. They can get after the quarterback. They get a lot of hits. And they get a lot of sacks. Patriots, yes, they did win this past weekend. Zappe went off. I think he had 3 touchdowns that game. But obviously Vegas isn't counting on that happening twice. So just like the Jets, they're not buying it as of right now. So don't overreact. Patriots, I don't know if Bill Belichick's coming back next year. I don't know why he even won the game this past Thursday night. You need to get the number 1 draft pick. You must draft a quarterback. You have to reset this team starting at the quarterback position. Bill doesn't seem to have gotten the memo, so I don't really know what they have going on with there. I don't think Robert Kraft wanted to win that game, but maybe Bill Belichick's out, and he's just trying to win as many games as he can before the season ends. I don't really know there. But Kansas City, they average 22.5 points per game. Patriots, a pathetic 13.0 points per game. And on defense, Kansas City gives up 17.5 points per game. Patriots, 20.9 points per game. So I have Kansas City. They must get things back on track. They cannot continue to fall behind. I have them riding the ship here this week, winning 27-14 and covering that spread on the road. The next game that we'll be looking at 1 p.m. on Fox, we have the 5-8 New York Giants. They've been hot. This is also a team with a backup quarterback. So Daniel Jones goes down. They have Tommy DeVito playing. He's basically been a saving grace. So he's gotten this team a couple wins so far, getting them close to trying to get back to 500, to try to be competitive and basically to try to save face. And then you have the Saints here sitting at 6-7. Saints have completely fallen off the rails. This team's 6-7. This roster is a lot better than a 6-7 roster. They have a very good defense. They have skilled position players. They have Olave. They have Kamara. Derek Carr is a shell of himself. The guy cannot throw past 5 yards. For some reason, he's completely fallen off. But they are the favorites here at home. Looking at the team stats here, the Giants, they average 14.1 points per game. I think that's the second worst. But Tommy DeVito has this team moving the ball. But he is getting hit a lot and taking a lot of sacks. Saints average 21.9 points per game. And on defense, the Giants give up 24.2 points per game. Saints give up 20.1 points per game. To me, the Saints are due to get a win. Statistically, at some point, they have to get another win. They have to get back to 500. This team's a lot better than their record. I have the Saints winning this one, but close. Winning 20-17, so not covering the spread. The next game at 1 p.m. on Fox, we have the 6-7 Atlanta Falcons at the 1-2 Panthers. The Falcons are 3-point favorites here. With this game, I kind of flip-flopped a couple times because even though the Panthers have one win, and they've looked really bad for weeks and weeks and weeks now, to me, they're due to be getting that second win at some point. So at some point, the win is going to sneak up on us, and they're going to steal a game. So I kind of kept flip-flopping on if this is the game that they win. When you look at these two teams here. So you have Bryce Young with the Panthers. You have Ritter for the Falcons. Falcons are a lot better than their 6-7 record. It's just their biggest problem is the quarterback position. They don't have a good quarterback. So they don't have someone who can get the ball to the playmakers. They don't let Bijan Robinson run. They don't get the ball to Pitts enough. To me, they need to be pushing the ball to him. But they have a lot of skilled position players. So this team is very talented. They do average 19.3 points per game on offense. Panthers average 15.2 points per game. So this is a battle of two pretty sloppy offenses. And on defense, Falcons give up 20.7 points per game, and the Panthers give up a pretty bad 26.2 points per game. So the Panthers basically have absolutely nothing going for them. They don't even have a first round. So it's not like they're trying to bomb to get a top pick. They don't have anything to look forward to right now. They did fire their coach, so they're just kind of spiraling. But like I said, they're bound to get a win at some point. But this week, I have the Falcons still getting the win, 24-20, and covering that spread. Then at 4:05 p.m. on CBS, we have the 4-9 Washington Commanders versus the 6-7 LA Rams. The Rams are 6.5-point favorites here for the Commanders. So Ron Rivera is a dead man walking right now, basically. The guy's not going to keep his job, should have been fired a long time ago. He should have not even been the head coach for 5 or 6 years. The guy cannot coach offensive football. But Sam Howell has been going off. He's the most hit, the most sacked quarterback. He gets hit constantly. Throws the ball, still gets hit. But he's having a really good statistical year, throwing for a lot of yards, a lot of picks. But, I mean, come on. He has Ron Rivera as his head coach. For the Rams, this team has actually been playing pretty well. They still have Stafford, Kupp, Nakua has been going off this year. Williams has been having a pretty strong season at running back for the last few weeks. Looking at the total team stats here. So the Commanders average 20.1 points per game. The Rams 23.0 points per game. And on defense, the Commanders, Ron Rivera's specialty is defense. They have the worst defense, probably one of the worst I've ever seen in pro football. They give up 30.4 points per game, and the Rams give up 22.3 points per game. So the Rams have the better offense, and nobody has as bad of a defense as the Commanders. I do not have them winning this game, although they can do it potentially because Sam Howell can have some pretty high-scoring games. He is capable of throwing for 350 yards. But I have the Rams getting the win. This is a very much improved team over last season. They win 28-21, and they cover the spread. Next at 4:05 p.m. on CBS, we have the San Francisco 49ers sitting at 10-3. Many people would say that they are the best team in pro football. They will be visiting the Arizona Cardinals, who sit at the opposite, 3-10. San Francisco is 12.5-point favorites here. So the 49ers, since they had that bye week and they came back and played Jacksonville, they've been curb-stomping teams. They're on a 5 or 6 game winning streak right now. Brock Purdy is going off, but this is hands down the best roster in football from top to bottom on special teams, offense, and defense, and they added Chase Young 3 weeks ago, so they're even better on the defensive side of the football. They can throw it, they can run it, they have pass catchers, they have Purdy, McCaffrey, Ayuk, Kittle. This team is loaded. Looking at the total team stats here, San Francisco comes in, they average 29.2 points per game. They have a top 3 offense, and the Cardinals average 17.7 points per game. And on defense, San Francisco has a top 3 defense. They only give up 15.8 points per game, and the Cardinals give up 25.5 points per game. Cardinals did beat the Cowboys earlier this season. So I'm not saying that it's not possible, because they have beaten way better teams, but it's very unlikely. They do have Kyler Murray back. They have been playing better since he came back, but they were pretty bad starting out. So I have the 49ers getting an easy win here, winning 31-17 and covering that really big spread. The next game that we're looking at is one of the better games. This is one of the better games of the season to me. At 4:25 p.m. on Fox, we have the 10-3 Dallas Cowboys, who have been hot. They've been looking really good on defense, and they still have a top 3 offense also. Versus the Bills at 7-6. Bills finally got back over 500. They're still in the hunt for the playoffs and for the division as well, but they basically need to win every single game from this point forward. But they are capable of it. Now, the Bills are the favorite team, so they are 2.5-point favorites here. Like we said, the Bills must win this game. Cowboys are coming off of a beatdown of the Eagles. They're as hot as anyone right now. It's basically the Cowboys and the 49ers are the 2 hottest teams right now in all of football. When you look at the team stats here, so the Cowboys come in, they average on offense 32.4 points per game. They have a top 2 offense, the number 1 offense in all of football. But Buffalo's not too far behind. So they also have a top 6 offense. They average 26.8 points per game. So they can score it. You have Josh Allen. He's a gunslinger. And on defense, Dallas comes in. They give up 17.9 points per game, and Buffalo 18.8 points per game. So their defense is not too far behind Dallas's defense. So this is actually a pretty evenly matched game. The records do not look the same, but do not underestimate the talent of the Buffalo Bills roster. Their biggest issue is the day that the offense plays well, the defense plays bad. The days that the defense plays well, the offense plays bad. If they ever get things on the same page, this is technically a Super Bowl winning roster. That's why the Bills are favored versus the 10-3 hot Dallas Cowboys. But I still have the Cowboys getting the win. So I'm still going to go with the +2.5. I have Dallas getting the win here, 28-27. But I would in no way be surprised if the Bills win this game. They're a really good team. I'm not going anywhere near this game. I'm almost 50-50 here. I'm going to go with Dallas, but Buffalo is more than capable of stealing this one. The next game that we'll be looking at is the final game on Sunday night at 8:20 p.m. on NBC. We have the 10-3 Baltimore Ravens versus the 8-5 Jacksonville Jaguars. Baltimore is 3-point favorites here on the road. Jacksonville's kind of fallen off the last 2 weeks. Their biggest issue the whole year was the offense. Trevor Lawrence was in no way having the same season that he had last year. He's not having a bad season, but just not having the same season that he had last year. He did get banged up 2 weeks ago. He was pretty hobbled this past weekend. As of right now, he is still playing Sunday, so they will still have their full roster. For the Ravens, this is one of the better roster teams, one of the better offenses, one of the better defenses. They have Lamar Jackson. They might get Mark Andrews back potentially right before the playoffs, during the playoffs. We don't know yet, but they're kind of floating that out there, so they definitely have something to play for. This is one of the better Ravens teams we have seen fielded in probably the last 10 to 15 years. So this is a really good roster. Looking at the total team stats here, the Ravens average 27.8 points per game. They have a top 6 offense. Jacksonville comes in, they average 24 points per game. So they have a above average offense, but still a very skilled team, very talented team. Do not overlook the Jags here. And on defense, Baltimore gives up 16.8 points per game. They also have a top 6 defense, and the Jags give up 22.3 points per game. The Jags can win this game. They are a pretty decent team, but this Baltimore team is stacked. Like I said, they are playing to position themselves well in the playoffs to try to get the best opponent. Lamar Jackson having a great season so far. He's the leading passer. He's the leading rusher on this team. I have the Ravens getting the win here, 30-24, and covering that spread. The next game that we'll be looking at is our Monday night game, the final game of the week. At 8:15 p.m. on ABC, we have the 10-3 Philadelphia Eagles versus the 6-7 Seattle Seahawks. The Eagles are 4-point favorites here. I did pick the Eagles to lose the last 2 weeks. Like I said, they were 10-1, but they were the least talked about 10-1 team ever. No one was actually taking them fully serious. No one was afraid of them because Jalen Hurts has not been having the same season that he had last year. They still have a top 3 offensive line. They have Swift. They have A.J. Brown. They have Devontae Smith. So one of the better offensive rosters, but they've been giving up points. Hurts has been banged up and not playing well so far. You have the Seattle Seahawks. They started out bad. They got really hot, and then now they're back to playing bad. But the Eagles, they went to the Super Bowl last year. They are 4-point favorites here. Do not in any way underestimate the Eagles. This is one of the better talented rosters in all of football. They're on a 2-game losing streak, but that's bound to end, and that should be ending this weekend. So you have the Eagles averaging 26.3 points per game. Seattle averages 21.5 points per game. And on defense, that's the Eagles' biggest flaw there. They average 24.7 points per game. Seattle averages 24.5 points per game. So I have the Eagles. They're due to get back to winning. I have them getting their 11th win of the season, winning 28-24 versus Seattle. They're at the push right now, but I would not be surprised if that line potentially moves down. But as of right now, I do have the Eagles winning. So that's all of our games for this week. We have no teams on the bye right now. We are getting pretty close to the playoffs. But hit that like button and subscribe. If you have any opinions on these games, drop it in the comments below, and I will make sure to respond. Thank you.